Firstly, I'm overjoyed that the Choice winner is a photographer. I think this is maybe the first time that's happened, so I'm over the moon about that. I think Grete's work from the very beginning stood out. I think her singular images stand alone with so much power and impact. I think she manages to create a really unusual color balance too. She shoots these photographs somewhere between twilight and dusk, so there's this incredible blue light that's sort of darkening, filtering through the trees, and she does some masterful work with her torches and really illuminates these trees beautifully and really brings them to life. The series began with her walking through Epping Forest, which, as you may or may not know, is in the northeastern part, outskirts of London. And like everyone during the pandemic, we found our different spaces to seek kind of solace and calm. I think that's where the series really began. Epping Forest was really a great source of inspiration, and that's also a testament going forward because her new series, Sanctum, is also set in Epping Forest, so it continues to be this really inspirational space for her. It is a forest, but humans have had an impact on it. So I think in her own ways, she's talking about our climate emergency. I think she's just had a very inventive way of bringing personality to these very sculptural, sadly very scarred and quite sad in some cases, trees. They are given this incredible personality. Each one has a name of a mythological character, and it's set in this, as she says, Tartarus, which is, not the best place to be, but she set each of these characters within this mythological space, which I find really interesting too.
Especially during lockdown, I found myself with a lot of spare time and a lot of time to think. And I realized I wasn't all that happy about working as a commercial photographer that much. And I really felt a strong urge to start expressing myself and my ideas. I've spent a lot of time over the years in a place called Epping Forest, where I go for long, long walks and to just get away from the city. And I've taken photos there before, but nothing as elaborate as this. This all came about from a walk with a friend of mine who's also a photographer, and I started pointing out all the really interesting shapes of the trees and how they've grown into those shapes by being pollarded, which means cut for the timber trade. And I said, look, they look like sculptures, they look like monsters, they look like they're alive. And she said, well, you're a photographer, come on, you have to take pictures of them. And I said, I know, but I don't know how, because if you take a picture of one tree, you'll just get a picture of all the trees. How do you isolate a tree from the background? And that's when I started thinking, well, I always use lighting in all my other work. I love experimental lighting, as you can probably see, anything that glows, I love to play around with. So I thought, this is the solution. I have to light them in order to show them in all their glory and really bring out the drama and personalities of these amazing tree stumps. So I named the series behind me Tartarus, which is the name of the part of the Greek underworld where people or the gods were thrown there to be tortured for whatever sins or whatever threat they posed. I gave it that name because I always thought of that part of the forest with those particular trees as the tortured forest, because I'd look at the trees and think they are just grown into the most weird shapes and they look all twisted and torn and look like they're in agony. And I thought, well, this is very similar to the kind of torture that happened in Greek mythology, which was usually based on very repetitive, futile tasks. But maybe have to roll the barrel up the hill like Sisyphus, or some of them would have to fill a trough of water that would just leak, and they'd have to keep refilling it. So there's a lot of repetition, and the same thing has happened to these trees. They've been cut and cut and cut for the timber trade and had to regrow their branches over and over again. And at the end, they're exhausted. So from their perspective, from the tree's perspective, they have been tortured. And yeah, this is the result of that, as you can see. In my most recent series, I've looked at those little shelters that you find all around the forest, and they're just made of sticks. And they're probably meant to be covered with some leaves and moss to make them a bit more insulated. But I love the fact that they are just a bunch of sticks that don't offer any protection or any shelter whatsoever. And they're made by children who are learning about the forest and how to survive. And I thought, well, I like the concept of the shelter, that it's a place where you just feel protected. And I thought, in order to show that, I need to put maybe a person in there. And the obvious choice was me, because I go to the forest on my own, putting myself in there, wearing the most flimsy white material I could find that doesn't offer any warmth or any insulation or any protection either. And I've lit the little shelters so that they look like a really cozy place to be. A shelter can be a mental space or just an escape from stress of normal life or whatever. So that's what I'm trying to illustrate.